and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'd like to share with you 10 tips for beginner digital artists. These small steps will help you learn faster and improve your overall drawing experience. Or so I hope. I use them all the time. They are simple and easy to follow, because life is complicated enough. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the video.
It's good to know how your drawing software of choice works, where to find the basic tools, how to apply effects, where to find the keyboard shortcuts, and how to move around. I work with Paint Tool Sai, so my examples will apply to this specific software, but there are similar shortcuts in other drawing media such as Krita or Photoshop. For example, while holding E, it temporarily switches to the eraser. I find this extremely helpful because I don't have to constantly switch the brush to eraser. I just hold E, and when I no longer need to erase something, it switches back to the tool I was previously using, in this case the brush tool. V switches to the brush mode, so you can use the brush tool, then press E to switch to the eraser and V to switch back to the brush. D erases the current layer, so when you want to make sure there's nothing on the layer you work, simply use D to erase it. When holding the spacebar, you can move the picture around. X switches between the primary and the secondary colors. And when you're drawing on a tablet, I recommend using F11 for a full screen view. I'm currently in the full screen view. As you can see, the working space is larger than when you use the normal view, and therefore makes it easier to draw. Organizing your layers is another useful thing you can do to improve your drawing process. It's best to make the sketch, the line art, and the colors on separate layers. This way, when you make a mistake, you can easily correct it. Drawing objects on different layers also makes it possible to move them around whenever you need to apply some changes. If you'd like to move an object without moving the background, this makes it possible. It might take time to organize all the layers accordingly. As you can see, I have a lot of layers, but thankfully, you can use folders to make it easier. In the end, it will be worth it. The way layers work is the highest layer, here, the one on top, always covers everything that's on the lower layer. So if you're planning to color a line art, make sure you do it on a lower layer than the line art, otherwise it will cover it. Of course, if you're going to do a more natural approach and you don't want the lines to show, you can make a sketch first and on a higher layer put the colors. Drawing from references is a great way to learn proportions, composition, and colors. You can find lots of pictures online by simply writing keywords in the browser. You can scale the references, flip them around, use more than one image to create complex compositions, or overlay them to capture the thing you want to draw. But keep in mind that many images have copyrights and cannot be used without permission of the owner. Do not steal poses and do not sell your pictures without checking if the reference you used had a free license. If you struggle with proportions, You can also trace a picture by simply lowering its opacity and drawing the line art on a different layer. This helps a lot with learning how to draw poses. But be careful not to copy the picture. Use this as means to learn, not to steal others' art. The idea of a reference is to either get inspiration from something or to draw something in your own way. You can make small adjustments by selecting a part of the sketch with the lasso tool and transforming it with the transform tool. These tools are basically in every drawing software. With the lasso tool, you select a specific object or space, then you can move it around, fill the space with color, or transform it. Transforming an object makes it possible to change the size and shape of the selected object. So instead of erasing a part of the sketch with the eraser, you can select it with the lasso tool and transform it to your liking. It's often a very quick and effective way to apply changes in the early stages of the sketch or even the line art. In every drawing software is a color wheel that lets you choose colors. It's important to learn how it works. You can find colors by moving around the wheel and set the saturation by moving inside the wheel. In Tool Sai, you can pick the shades and draw them on a small empty box. It's something like an on-school palette used by painters. This makes it easy to choose colors you often use. Every artist has their own color palette. I prefer to use this to the color wheel. Instead the color wheel, you can also use the HSV slider. HSV stands for Hue Saturation Value. It takes less space and is just as easy to use. If you want to shade your picture or apply some nice glowing effects, the best way to do so is to use a clipping layer, also called a clipping mask. This creates something like a sub-layer to the one you're working on. This sub-layer is locked within that layer. In simple words, whatever you'll draw on the clipped layer will apply only to what's on a specific layer below. You can make a ton of effects, each one on a separate layer, and if you want to change, for example, the color of the shade, simply lock that layer and draw over it. Locking an image means you can't draw outside of what's already on that layer. In Tool Sai, locking the image is a bit different than in Photoshop. You need to check the Preserve Opacity box right above the clipping group. That locks the image. Adding effects makes a picture stand out. The ones I often use are Multiply for shading, Screen for highlights, and Overlay for light effects and textures. You can use them as clipping layers or just draw them on different layers. Playing around with the effects can make a huge difference in the end, so I encourage everyone to try it out. Add some luminescence to make lights glow, shade using Multiply using the same color as the color of the layer, or try mixing things to find interesting results. good set of brushes helps a lot with the drawing process. You can use different brushes to sketch to make the line art and color. There are some brushes that give textures such as scales or form shapes like the clouds and bushes. It's good to learn when to use each brush and when not to overuse it. A good balance is to use textured brushes to give more detail to an already existing drawing than to draw with it. Tool Sai doesn't have a huge amount of default brushes, but I found it a lot easier to modify the existing ones than to have a huge list like in Photoshop, for example. You don't really need a lot of brushes. You can use the existing ones with a very good effect. Sometimes the simple things make far better results than overcomplicating things. The blur tool can be a very useful thing with making gradients, smoothing lines, and blending colors. When you want to turn your hard shades into soft ones, the blur tool is a great option. Just smooth all of the lines and the effect will be similar to using an airbrush. You can also make a mix of soft and hard lines for a pretty interesting result. The blur tool is a good option when you want to make gradients and don't have a gradient tool. Just use two different colors and blur the harsh line between them to create a nice blending effect. You can even use the blur tool to make a smooth color transition with textures. The most important tip: practice, practice, and practice. The more you practice, the better results you'll get. Don't get discouraged if things don't look great at first. They rarely do so. But after a while, you'll see better results. I promise. As an example, here are some of my old drawings. And here, some recent ones. See the difference? Let this be a motivation boost for you to keep on practicing. As they say, practice makes perfect.
This sums up all of the tips. Please let me know in the comments below if you already knew any of them and what are your ways of simplifying the drawing process. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. See you soon. Bye!